Hey, Eric.
Hey, Wally, how you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
Pretty good. So, Wally Devereaux, Southwest Airlines Cargo, head of, what's your exact official title?
Managing Director of the cargo and actually the passenger charter business, believe it or not. So
Right.
we have that all combined in one department.
So listen, I wanted to congratulate you. I just heard that Southwest Airlines won for like the 11th consecutive year. You know, you're like the UCLA of AirCargo, the Air Forwarders Association's annual award for, best domestic carrier. Why do you think you've been so popular among the forwarding community?
First of all, it's something that we never take for granted. It's a terrific honor to be recognized by the Air Forwarders Association. I think at the end of the day, we have really passionate people at Southwest that really care about this business, and that certainly comes out as we interact with our customers and we resolve problems and try to work through different things with them. And we have a terrific network that's a bit unique as well, and so it offers a lot of redundancy and creative ways to get freight from point A to point B. And I think at the end of the day, what the freight forwarding community really wants is they want cargo to move, and that's something that we just happen to be good at because of that network and because we have really good people. So it's really a tribute to our folks out there in the field that do a lot of the heavy lifting every day and do it well.
How much cargo did you move last year, roughly?
We typically move on any given year a little over 200 million pounds of cargo, so somewhere in that neighborhood.
Now I know revenue was down a little bit last year, but that's not unusual. Everybody was pretty much down. What do you attribute that to? Just kind of just general market issues?
Yeah.
And what do you see kind of this year going forward?
It's an I think, we've heard a lot of people talk about trade and different things going on in the marketplace, and you think about that in the broader terms of international cargo especially, but that does certainly trickle down into the domestic freight market as well. And so you think about things like forward stocking, when a lot of inventory is being moved into the country to beat tariff or even the threat of a tariff. What that does is it inflates inventory levels, and it also kind of reduces the need for expedited transportation to some degree when you have high inventory levels. And so I think those that certainly had an impact on the domestic freight market as well. You certainly think about it in international terms, but it's not that the domestic air freight market is immune from that, because so much of what we move domestically is stuff that is imported into the United States. And so I think that certainly played into it a bit.
So in November, I remember talking to you and wrote about Southwest starting a barcode scanning program or initiative this year. I think that's plane side, not necessarily at the truck side. But can you update us on that? When will that start? How will it be phased in? And what's the benefit for the shipper or the logistics company?
Yeah. So historically, we have not scanned cargo as it's being loaded on the aircraft or as it's when it's being taken off of the aircraft. So, and this has been the number one thing that our shippers and customers have asked for many, many years, is that absolute confirmation on board. It's the fact that something comes off of it. And so really excited that that's been rolled out on the passenger side of our business, and now cargo is kind of the next step in that process for us. And so we'll, here at the end of March, maybe early April timeframe, we will actually be testing in just a handful of cities the actual scanning of cargo and all the pieces of cargo in those cities. And then that will progressively roll out through the entire network by really the end of that second quarter time frame is what we're planning. That can always move a little bit, but we're planning to have that essentially rolled out by the end of the second quarter. So very quickly here, we'll be able to have an absolute confirmation on board and an absolute confirmation that something was offloaded. I think the next big thing about that will come along is, so, it's nice that you can do that, and that's obviously a big part of the deal. The second part of it, though, is taking the information that you get and then being able to share that with shippers. And so that's not the first thing that happens right after we start doing that. There's some work that has to be done to make that information consumable and shareable with our shipping community, so we'll do that afterwards.
So right now you're just going to get the sensors out there, be able to track it, but then the next step to share it that's a little more work.
Yeah, and if you think about the sensors, all of that infrastructure is out in the field.
Right.
It's being used on all of our bags now, so that staff is out there using it, and it's just about labeling the cargo,
Right.
scanning the cargo.
Okay, so that'll just be used internally then at that point, or like?
At that point, we're using that information.
And then at what point will the forwarder start to see that information?
I think our time frame, Eric, and you're going to lock me in on this, but I think our time frame is towards the end of the year that would become available in information that we would either proactively push to shippers or that they can consume on our website on swacargo.com.
So someone I heard yesterday that Southwest Airlines is starting cargo screening with canines or to help with that. Is that true?
Yeah, that's something that we are looking into. It's certainly a really efficient way to screen cargo, and so we are very much interested in the practice of utilizing canine to screen cargo. We have not rolled that out on any kind of a major scale, but it is something that we're looking into.
You're testing a little bit. So, what's the potential need or benefit for that? Like, what's the current requirement or scanning, inspection regime like that you have to deal with, and then how would this supplement that?
Yeah, I don't think I can share the exacts related to how the cargo is
right.
what
you might
security.
have to kill me, right?
Right. But I would say this: so versus what we do today, when you add canine as an option to screening cargo, it just can be done much faster. It's very efficient,
right.
And it's very quick. And so when you think about a location that might have hundreds of boxes coming in and you're screening those through a process today that can be reduced down time-wise to a matter of minutes, it's a really attractive option, and it's a very good option. These dogs are well trained and they do an excellent job screening cargo, so it's certainly something that we're interested in.
So what about, let me ask you, does Southwest, what's your network like in Florida or Southwest U.S. down there?
It's extensive, would be the best way to describe it.
So in about a little over 2 weeks, we've got Valentine's Day coming. So a lot of flowers coming from South America potentially, or every year. What's Southwest's involvement in that market? Do you get some of that business or connections that to distribute throughout the United States?
And do. Yeah, that's so really two big days on our calendar from a seasonality standpoint for flowers or Valentine's Day and Mother's Day. So you have these two big events. We carry a lot of different kinds of perishable commodities, flowers certainly being one of them. So every year, right before that Valentine's Day holiday, we see a significant spike in our business coming from South Florida in particular, supporting the Valentine's Day holiday.
How does this year look compared to others? And do you have to, does that all ride in your bellies? Yeah, I guess you're not really adjusting your planes. It's just going on regular scheduled aircraft.
Correct. So you think about like a Fort Lauderdale. So in our case, we have Fort Lauderdale, which has a number of daily departures. It's a big operation for us. And then we also truck freight from Miami up to Orlando, which has even more departures. So we have a lot of available capacity to utilize to support the flower business during these kind of peak demand periods of time. As it relates to this season, it's hard to say. Believe it or not, the flower business does ebb and flow a little bit as the economy does, and so when the economy gets worse, the flower business can go down a little bit, and when the economy gets better, it can go up. And there are lots of other factors that affect the flower business as well. My expectation this year is it would be, pretty strong like it typically is. Whether it'll be better than last year or not is kind of hard to say.
Right. So it's benefiting the truckers see the business as well because they gotta take the stuff from the airports and either do it on a road feeder service or get it the short haul to the distributors and so forth.
Yep.
So let me ask you, Southwest is one of the largest airlines, or has the most aircraft of these Boeing 737 MAX, and also has a lot of them on order. And as everybody knows, had some safety problems in the last year or two, and so they've been grounded. I'm sure that's not Are there any indirect effects for the cargo side as far as like, wow, we were hoping to get that aircraft. Let's be a little better efficiency for cargo or a little more capacity or something. So is there any ripple effects from that delay on the cargo side for you all?
Well, I think, I guess maybe the one impact it certainly has had on us from a cargo standpoint has been Newark, and we closed our Newark operation down, and Newark was a good cargo location. So that's a pretty tangible impact related to the MAX grounding. I would say in general, when you think about the MAX, we grounded or had to ground 34 aircraft when that airplane was grounded. And since that time, we would have added probably another 35 or so aircraft. We would have had, at the end of 2019, probably an additional 70 aircraft in our fleet. And that's a lot of additional flying in a lot of different markets that could have been valuable for the cargo business. But in general, we're still, based on the way our network is, we're still able to really move a lot of freight creatively through lots of different routing options. And so I think for the most part, we've been able to accommodate our customers' requests. Would it have been nice to have 70 additional airplanes with lots of new routes potentially to offer? Yes. And would it have been nice to keep Newark? Sure, it would have been. But
what was the equation there with Newark that you were operating in Newark? And why did the unavailability of the MAX require that to be closed?
You think about the entire system, and you have a lot of commitments and opportunities around the network that you essentially were planning on with aircraft that you now don't have in the fleet at the moment. And so you have to live up to some of those obligations, and certainly some of those plans are very important. And so somewhere, you're going to have to come up with those airplanes to support that, and that, that's an example of what happened with Newark, and and there you go.
So let's go back, talk a little bit briefly. We got a couple more minutes left about the economy, or just the market for air cargo demand going forward in this year. Again, last year was tough, but there's so many domestic signs of strong economy. Housing starts were really good recently. Retail sales during the holidays and post-holiday have been pretty good. Unemployment's really low. Do those all bode well, or we also have on the flip side things like the coronavirus and potential trade tensions with Europe flaring up now? How do you see all that playing out in the mix?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you think about the domestic economy, it has been pretty strong in general. I think the domestic freight economy has not necessarily followed suit. So they don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Gotcha.
And that's what I think we've seen this last year. So when you look at things like the CAS Freight Index, for example, that really gives you this indication that the freight market is not doing terribly well. You look at things like the Purchasing Managers Index and things like that, and that also suggests things that maybe are not necessarily positive from a freight standpoint. So if you believe what you see and you read about maybe the way things might roll out through the end of this year, it seems like we're probably in for a little bit more of a maybe stable is the right word over the next couple of quarters, and then it seems like there could be some upside working into the mix here towards the latter part of the year, but that obviously remains to be seen.
So just like just domestic air freight's kind of similar to, in some ways, to domestic trucking, right? The trucking market's been it was down last year pretty much, even though the economy's doing well, because manufacturing's kind of in a tough space. So, and it's kind of similar. It's a different market than international, and so you're kind of seeing some of those same effects as the trucker guys.
Yeah, and back to what I had mentioned earlier with inventories. When inventories get high or higher because things are pushed into the United States from an import standpoint sooner than what might be needed, that has a tendency to push down on, it's certainly expedited transportation needs.
So listen, Wally, I want to thank you so much for filling us in on what Southwest Airlines Cargo is doing. Fascinating. You're one of the top operators out there. We learned a lot, and thanks you for giving us some of your insights.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it, sir.
That's it for FreightWaves Air on the FreightWaves Live studio set in Nashville.